Alright, it's Friday, so that means it's time for me to bring you a new deck. This week I'm going to be playing my Grixis control deck. I absolutely love Grixis, blue, black, and red magic, and as you can tell by my channel art, I've got a thing for Nicol Bolas, so this is my favorite deck in the game by far. So first thing I'm going to do is just walk you through the curve, take you through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and up mana, talk about the spells that I've got, and then after we go through all the cards, then I'll talk a little bit about the overall strategy of the deck. So first let's start on 1 mana. We have 4 copies of Shock. Shock is an excellent removal spell in this metagame. It's 1 mana, instant speed, 2 damage, target creature or player. Hits a lot of relevant targets. There's a lot of 2 toughness creatures in this game that you need to kill. Tallarans, Gutter Snipes, Mentor the Meek, just off the top of my head, Viscope Guild Mage, Electromancer sometimes. So Shock's a really versatile removal spell in this format. Also on 1 mana, which is kind of funny, but technically this is a 1 mana spell. We have Banefire, but it's really like a 17 mana spell in this deck. It's uncounterable damage that we use to fight through control decks counter spells. And it can also double as creature removal, so it's almost like a 5th Shock, but it scales with the game well. So I mean, if you have 7 mana, you can hit, an Arbor Colossus or something if you really need to, so it's kind of versatile that way. And then we move on to 2 mana. It says at the bottom, you can see we only have 4 2-mana spells, but there's actually 8 turn 2 plays we can make. I'll show you in a second. So Think Twice is our 2 mana card. Draw a card. And we can flash it back for... oh, there's Steely Deno. He's another Grixis fan. We can flash it back for 3 mana. So that's great to do on turn 2. Just, draw a card, cycle through your deck. When you're playing control, you really want to hit your land drops. And drawing an extra card on the second turn really helps make sure that you don't miss a drop. So the other thing we can do on turn 2 is cycle Traumatic Vision. So cycling, basic land cycling, we discard it for 1 colorless mana, 1 blue mana. And we get to grab a basic land out of our deck. So this fixes our colors, and again, just like Think Twice, it helps make sure that we don't miss our land drops. So we can play this on the second turn. If we draw it late in the game, it's a 5 mana counter spell, counters anything. So, well, except for something like Banefire, but you know what I mean. It's a hard counter spell, so that's good. 3 mana is the real meat of this deck. So on 3 mana, I'll take you to the end here first. 3 mana, well, one of the most important spells is Anger the Gods. We can only run 2, obviously, because it's rare. But this is the deck's primary way to fight through, fight aggro decks and gain advantage there. So it's a 3 damage sweeper for the whole board, and if you resolve this and get a 3 for 1 against an aggro deck, you're going to be in pretty good shape. It's still, it's not dead in other matchups. You can sometimes play Anger the Gods and then shock a Baneslayer to exile it. There are other things you can do with it, even against the mid-range decks. So another 3 mana removal spell we have is Resounding Thunder. It's 3 mana for 3 damage at instant speed, which is good enough on its own to get in here. But the real reason we're playing the card is because when we draw it in the late game, we can cycle it for 8 mana. So when we cycle it, it deals 6 damage to target creature or player, and because it's an activated ability, it's uncounterable. So there are going to be a lot of games where if you wait till your opponent's end step, cycle a Resounding Thunder, untap, and then blast a Banefire in their face, you can hit them for close to 20 just out of nowhere. On their end step they're at 18, and then when you untap they're dead. So Resounding Thunder really scales well. You notice that the cycling costs green mana. So I'm not playing any forests in the deck, but since we got the tri-lands with the expansion, instead of Rakdos Guildgates, which produce black and red mana, I just added the Savage Lands. There's only 3 green sources in the whole deck, but by the time you get to 8 mana, with the amount of card draw this deck has, you can reasonably expect to have a green source by then. And another 3 mana removal spell we have is Augur Spree. So target creature gets +4/-4 until end of turn. This one is really excellent because Brimaz is a bit of a problem. He's got 4 toughness. Rock's War Monk has 4 toughness. There's a few creatures out there that are just outside the range of Resounding Thunder, and this picks them off. And it also, since I'll take you through my creatures later, I've only got 4, but they've all got 6 or more toughness, so we can use this as kind of a boost to force through more damage. If we don't have it, we can use it either as removal in the early game, which is what we're going to do 99% of the time. But in the other 1% of the time, we can pump something up +4/-4 with this and use it on offense as well. So I think that's it for 3 mana. Is that it for 3 mana? No, we got Tribute to Hunger. Okay, so obviously we're playing a control deck with no creatures until turn 6. We got 1 creature at 6 mana, 2 at 7, and 1 at 10. So obviously we're not going to have any blockers. So life gain is pretty important to this deck, and because of all the other shocks, Resounding Thunders, Augur Sprees, all the counter spells, sorry, not the counter spells, all the removal spells that we have, we can keep the board fairly clean. So that means that if they have 1 big creature, so we kill all their little stuff, and all of a sudden they tap out for a Balaka Worm or a Baneslayer or an Arbor Colossus or just something really big, we can just Tribute to Hunger and make them sacrifice it and get back a lot of the life we lost in the early game. So it's an excellent removal spell in this deck. So then we move to 4 mana. I've got the 4 copies of Inspiration here. So the whole, I mean, this deck is mostly instants. I've got 31 spells, and I think only 3 of those are sorceries, plus I got the Obelisk of Valara, so there's 27 instants in this deck. You pretty much just play a land and pass, you know, you just play draw go here. And if your opponent doesn't do anything worth killing or countering, then you just sink all your mana into Think Twice and Inspiration, and you just get ahead on cards, hit your land drops, and make sure you got more answers than they got threats. So let's move on to 5 mana. 5 mana, okay, so we can play these on turn 2, like I said, but also it's a 5 mana counter spell, which is great in the late game. There are certain card types this deck has a problem with, you know, enchantments and artifacts being first and foremost among them. You know, we don't have any way to interact with resolved enchantments. You know, once they're on the board, that's it. We can't, unless, you know, we could attack with Kozilek and they could sacrifice it, I suppose, but that's kind of, you know, pretty corner case right there. So that's our way of actually trying to beat those cards, is counter them before they hit play. And then we move on to 6 mana. 6 mana, so we only got one 6 mana card. No, 2 6 mana cards. Okay, we've got the Inferno Titan. This guy, so when you cast him, you get an Arc Lightning, which is the 3 damage spread among up to 3 targets. Not when you cast him, sorry, when he enters the battlefield. He has Fire Breathing. He's a 6/6, and when he swings, you get another Arc Lightning. So he's kind of like the 3rd copy of Anger of the Gods. He lets you, you know, you can pick off aggro decks and brick wall him with this guy, and he's also a win condition. And Obelisk of Valara, so obviously we're playing blue, black, and red, so we can do the whole, all 3 of those middle modes there. The red mode is a win condition. The black mode is great in this deck actually. It's removal on its own. -2 is just like a shock. It hits a lot of things, but also all of the removal in this deck is toughness based. Like I'm not playing anything like a Flesh to Dust. That just is unconditional removal. So what this does, for 2 mana, it scales up all my spells. So my Shocks can hit X4s, my Resounding Thunders can hit X5s, and my Augur Sprees can hit X6s just for an extra 2 mana too. So it upgrades them. The blue mode is pretty good. If you're flooding out, you just can tap it, discard your land, and get deeper into your deck, and hopefully get to your business spells. As I said, we're playing 3 Savage lands, so every now and then we can use the target creature gets +4/+4. I mean, I've done that. I've taken a Runescarred Demon, I've pumped it up with the Obelisk, and then cast Augur Spree on it to swing for 14. I mean, it's not something that the deck does very often, but it's a line that you can have. I mean, we're playing green anyway for Resounding Thunder, so it's nice to have the option. And the white mode, so I used to play Dimir Gilgates pre-expansion, which is obviously black and blue mana, but I changed them out for Arcane Sanctums, because you still get the blue and black mana, they still enter the battlefield tapped, but you get 3 free white sources. So if I get a white source into play, I mean, you know, as a control deck with no blockers, there are going to be times when you don't stabilize your board until you're on like 3 or 4 or 5 life, you know, somewhere really, really low. And if you can just gain 5 life for 2 or 3 turns in a row and get back to 20, you pretty much can't lose the game. So it's an excellent, excellent option for a control deck to have. So I'm really glad that card's in there. And on 7 mana, we got this bad boy here. I love this card. He's actually kind of like one of the things that makes this deck so consistent, because most of our all of our best win conditions are just single copies. I'll talk about that in a minute. But Runescarred Demon, he's a 6/6 flyer for 7 mana, so I mean that's a win condition on its own. But you get the tutor effects, so you get to go into your library and get whatever the hell you want. So depending on if you're playing against a control deck, maybe you want Banefire, maybe you've got 15 mana and you want to cast Kozilek, and you know, maybe you need Inferno Titan, maybe you need Anger of the Gods. You know, it's a fantastic card, and like I said, you can pump it up with the Obelisk, you can use the Augur Spree to force through damage with it. It's a good blocker. So it's an excellent card here. And the last card we have here is Kozilek. Obviously, he's the finisher of choice in any control deck. 10 mana, 12/12. You get 4 cards when you cast him, so even if they counter him, you're getting 4 cards, which is, you know, pretty busted. And if he swings, they have to sacrifice 4 permanents, which is just absolutely insane. So I've also had times too where I've had my opponent on 20 life. You know, I don't do any damage to him, and then I pump this bad boy up with the Obelisk, and then use Augur Spree and just smack him for 20, which is pretty fun. So that's the deck. Like I was saying about Runescarred Demon, so this deck has three main win conditions. So I mean, well, we'll call it 4. The 4th win condition is the 2 copies of Runescarred Demon, you know, just the 6/6s, and the 1 copy of Inferno Titan. They're here mostly for their enter the battlefield effects, but they're 6/6s that can win the game. But the 3 other win conditions are Kozilek, Obelisk, and Banefire. And like I said, Banefire plays really well with Resounding Thunder. There's a ton of uncounterable damage in this deck. But so all these win conditions that I'm talking about, the Banefire, the Kozilek, the Obelisk, they're all singletons. And what Runescar Demon does is he gives you a virtual 3 copies of each, so you don't have to play multiple copies of those spells, you know, because you really only need one of them in any given matchup to win the game, and he lets you kind of decide what, you know, based on what type of matchup you're playing, which one you go in and get. And so he gives the deck a tremendous amount of consistency. So I really like him. One other good thing about this deck too, it's only playing 4 creatures, so, and you know they're all huge. So one thing you can do is just blank your opponent's removal. You know, if they're sitting there with a bunch of removal spells, they don't have any targets for them basically, and so then they have a ton of dead draws in their deck. And you might think, well, gee, you know, you're playing a ton of removal. Well, and you know, you're going to have all sorts of dead draws in some matchups. Well, that's actually not really the case with this deck, because Banefire is a removal spell, but it can go to the face. Shock's a removal spell, but it can go to the face. Resounding Thunder is a removal spell, but it can go to the face, and it's uncounterable. That's you know, once you hit 8 mana and get the green source into play. And Augur Spree is a removal spell, but you can use it to buff up your creatures. So I mean, even though I'm playing a ton of removal spells, most of them can be pointed, you know, directly to the dome or have some other utility, so they're really never dead. This deck is, you know, I gotta say, I love control. It's my favorite archetype in the game. I just absolutely love to kill creatures, if you couldn't tell by this deck. I love countering spells, I love drawing cards, and I love playing big creatures like Runescar Demon and, you know, uncounterable damage like this, and burning guys out, tapping obelisks for life, and then burning them out with the red mode, annihilating boards with Kozilek. This is just a real fun deck to play if you like to play control. So I'll take you over and show you the mana base here now. Let's dip down and have a look. I use Royal Assassin as my deck box, because you know this deck just kills everything. So Royal Assassin is a great guy to put on there. So you can see there's only 9 black spells. It says 16 red spells and 12 blue, but I'm not too concerned about the blue distribution, because I only need 1 blue source, and then I can cycle. So I can go get my second blue, second black, second red. I only need 1 blue source to cast Think Twice. I only need 1 blue source to cast an Inspiration. The only time I ever need double blue is for Traumatic Visions, and that's well into the late game, and there's so much draw in this deck, I should be able to find a second blue source. The main thing I want is to be able to cast this. This is very important to cast on time. I want to have a shock available on the first or second turn. As soon as I untap, maybe I'll play a tap land, but I want it to have red on it. I want to be able to have access to that right away. So I'm skewing my mana base heavier into red, with a medium black level, because I do have to be able to cast Runescar Demon by the time I get to 7 mana. And I do have to sometimes cast Augur Spree on the 3rd turn. So we're looking at 4 Izzet Guildgates. We have 3 Savage Lands, which used to be Rakdos Guildgates. We have 3 Arcane Sanctums, which used to be Dimir Guildgates. And of course the 3 Necropolises, because, well, that's the Grixis Shardland. So right here we have 7 mountains, so that brings us to 3, 3, 10, so that's 17 red sources. So with that many red sources, you're getting double red on turn 3. The black sources, we have 3, 3, and 3, and 4, so there's 13 black sources, and then we have 4, 3, 3, 11 blue sources. So I think that's a pretty good mix. It's been working out for me. The only reason this is here is because sometimes I want to cycle for it. The Savage Lands is my only source of green mana for cycling those Thunders, but like I said, with the amount of card draw on the deck, you can realistically, by the time you hit 8 mana, expect to see one of these. And the same goes here. The only reason the white mana is in the deck is for the white mode on Obelisk of Alara. But you know, if you just draw into one naturally, it's no different than a Dimir Gate. But if you use that white source to gain 5 life per turn, then it's just amazing. So that's the deck. Hopefully, I'm gonna get out now and just kill a whole bunch of creatures all week long, and show you how this control deck runs, because I absolutely love playing this deck. It's basically, if I'm sitting down, if I'm not testing a new deck or, you know, refining an old deck, if I'm just sitting down to play and have fun, this is the deck that I'm playing. So I hope you like it, and hopefully I can put up some good results with it. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back with a gameplay very shortly.